New Landing's Job Chat is brought to you in part by the Prosperity Advisory Group, the next step in your financial future. And by the EBS Group, with an unparalleled background in Oracle solutions and services.
Dating can be fun. It could be interesting, and it could be sometimes hurtful. But how is all that related to job searching? You'll find out today on Job Chat. Your hosts are Hector Silva and
Sarah Kane.
Our guest is Mark Naster.
Mark has over 35 years of experience in dealing with people-related business issues. He has seen all sides of the for-profit world and has worked in a variety of industries and businesses. His extensive experience in staffing has given him tremendous insight into the hiring process, the good, the bad, and definitely the ugly. During the course of his career, he has worked for Ross Perot, Ewing Kaufman, and Lamar Hunt. He is now devoting himself full-time to helping people less fortunate than himself by working with Heartland Habitat for Humanity. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Mark. Mark, that first date can be intimidating and sometimes uncomfortable. But how does that relate to job searching?
The date is the interview. The interview and the date are the same thing. You're trying to find out. You think, here's the problem, here's the issue that we have. The potential employee goes into the interview thinking, am I good enough for them? Are they going to like me? The employer, on the other hand, is looking at it and going, are they good enough for me? I don't care if they like me. But in a courtship, you're going out to learn more about the other person. You've got the date because hopefully you've made a connection. You assume there's some degree of compatibility. Whether it's compatibility of interest, compatibility of values, probably the most important thing as we've talked about, the compatibility of values. And so going into the date, it's the same thing. The interview is a date. That's all it is. You know, it's not a game. Unfortunately, the way that many people are being trained or taught about what's the right interview question, how do you answer the interview question. I saw on the internet last week on the MSN homepage, 13 questions that can derail you, and 13. It's not a game. This is life. This is 8 to 10 hours a day you're spending your time with. You're going on a date to evaluate that other person to find out if they're compatible with you. Most people go into a date, an interview, in a submissive role. They go in thinking, are they going to like me? Are they going to hire me? Oh gosh, I hope. If you think about your life and you think about courtship, if you've ever gone out with anybody like that has been lonely and that is looking, a family member of mine has gone out on dates where it's like they're looking for a date. I mean, they're looking for a husband, and they'll do anything they can. They'll say anything they can. And that's what happens on this gamesmanship on the interviews. But in reality, it eventually comes out. That's why you go on more than one date.
So you have to be yourself.
You have to be yourself. You got to know yourself. You got to know your history. You got to prepare for your date. And it's really easy because when you're going out on a date and you're sitting there or you're driving in the car or you're having dinner and you start talking about, chit-chat about certain things, and you're reliving certain events in your life that you're going to convey that may be compatible with other person. Oh, you were at this event. And, oh, yeah, what did you think of that show? And you start talking about it. Well, it's the same thing in employment because you're trying to relate similar situations in your business life to let the employer know that I've been there. I've done that. I'm the kind of person that I think you should be interested in. But that's the submissive role. That's the selling role. The evaluation role is where I think many people fall when it comes to looking at employers. They're not evaluating the employer as much as they think the employer is evaluating them. And again, you're more empowered if you treat this as a courtship. You go into the interview thinking, not in an arrogant fashion, but you go in looking at the employer and evaluating the employer and not just the person that's interviewing you. That's really an interesting part. I always tell people, get to your interview 10 minutes early, at least. Any more than that, and you can feel uncomfortable, and the people that can make you feel. Get there 10 minutes early. Why? Well, it's to impress somebody. No. You go there to sit in the lobby. One, you want to find out how you're treated by the receptionist. The receptionist that is the face of the company. That vendors and customers that come into the building, the first person they see, how is that person treating you? You get to sit in the lobby and watch other employees walk through. You get to see how people treat the FedEx person or the UPS person or the people that walk through the halls and they're talking to each other or they're their heads down. And you get a sense of culture. You get a sense of the environment by showing up a little bit early. It's a little bit different than a date, but you're getting a sense. Look, if you're going to pick somebody up at their apartment or at their house, and they invite you in as they're finishing up getting ready, and you look at the house and you go, "Oh God," if you're a slob, you may be comfortable with that person. If you're meticulous, it's like the Odd Couple. That may be a signal. So as you go in and you look at the environment, that's just as important to you as you are thinking about them evaluating you. And you're there to observe, to learn more about that culture and that environment. And then how you're treated throughout this whole process by the interviewer, by the people that are there. If the person you're meeting with has an assistant who is taking you to their office or to a conference room, how are they treating you? Oh, would you like some water? Would you like some coffee? Would you like something to drink? Do you need to use a restroom? Little things that give you a signal of, God, could I be happy in this environment? So that's just getting ready that's just getting to the date.
Right, and now you go into the restaurant, you sit down and you get a glass of wine. Now you got to talk.
Yeah.
And you got to start thinking, what am I saying or going to say that's going to make this person interested in me?
What do you have to offer them? It's a sell job, but it's an evaluation too.
You got to know what you're looking for as well.
Oh yeah.
So not only what you bring to the table, but what are you looking for?
Let's just talk about the setting just a second. Just talk about the setting. I'm a real student of body language. I love body language. It's helped me in my career over the years. But if you go into an interview and the person interviewing you is sitting across the table from you, and the chairs are lower, the interview chairs are lower than the desk chair, they're putting you in a submissive role right off the bat. I didn't click very well. Right off the bat. You're being put in a submissive role. That should tell you something.
Now, do employers know that they're doing that? Do they do that on purpose, or sometimes that's just...
I think sometimes that's the way they were trained because that's their culture.
Okay.
Culture, values, the way people are treated. There are people that are in positions of authority that think they're better than everybody else because they happen to achieve a little bit more in a business setting, or maybe make a little bit more money. And again, if that's the way you're treated, if they're trying to attract you in, how are they going to treat you after you're hired? That's what a lot of employers don't understand. You have to be an employer of choice. You have to treat people. And I've talked to so many people that have not been treated well and they go in for an interview or even applied. The word is spreading. It's like getting bad customer service at a restaurant or at a car dealership or everyone else. People are telling, and people are going, well, there's enough people to work out there. Well, they may not be the right people. But it's one of those little things. So you go into the office, and if the person is sitting next to you, or if you're in an environment where there's comfortable chairs, and they invite you to sit there, they say, well, you sit on the edge of your seat to show your interest. Come on. Is that the way you go on a date? You sit you get in the car and you're driving and you're sitting there and, showing interest in the person. It's a game. It's not a game. So you think about it as a courtship. So you go into a restaurant and you order a glass of wine and you're sitting there. You're able to evaluate their interest in you by their body language. If they're leaning forward, and eventually, of course, this is not an employment, but eventually if they, touch your arm or something like that, of course, not an employment, but it's a similar type of situation. You want to find how comfortable are you in that environment. And that's again the value and the cultural component of it. Then when you get into the questioning, what kind of questions are they asking you? What is your biggest strength? Okay, is that really why they want to hire you? Or is it a game? They think they're supposed to ask this question. I am a student of behavioral interviewing. When the gentleman that founded behavioral interviewing first came out, I went to his I met him at a conference, and I was fascinated with it because that's the whole concept. The behavioral interviewing is you're evaluating somebody on what they did and how they did it, not by answering question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. So when people start asking you questions, what I've always explained to people going on a date, the employee, is if the employer, you got to ask yourself, why are they asking you these questions? Does that tell you something about them? But if they ask you a direct question, a closed-ended question, a yes or no question, give them a behavioral answer. I'll give you an example. What's your biggest strength? Well, you've already given them your areas of effectiveness, and one of your areas of strength is customer service. What's your biggest strength? I think dealing with customers is one of my biggest strengths. Okay? In a standard interview, that would end there. And then question, next question. Behavioral answer on a straight question is, what is your biggest strength? My biggest strength is customer service. And let me give you an example. I was working with this company, and I had a customer call in and blah, 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 blah. And not only were they more satisfied, but they increased their sales. And every time they called back, they asked for me. And I had increased our sales as a result of the way I treated our customers. And one of my biggest strengths, too, is problem solving. It's like people go, well, you're just being very verbose. Is that really true? I mean, is this a game? Is this an interrogation of a question, answer, question, answer, question, answer? Or is this to learn about how that person thinks, how that person responds? And we're in an interesting environment that when it comes to one of the biggest skills as we look ahead is problem solving. We have a whole demographic that solves problems with cell phones. That interact with text messaging and Facebook and other things, and that have never really solved problems face-to-face with people. So the people that have had that experience and that can share those one-on-one experiences on what I've done, and to reinforce, okay, the behavioral answer reinforces your qualification summary. It corroborates it because you've already said what you've accomplished. Now you're giving them the details. And here's another little thing. When you go on a date and you're getting to know somebody and they're getting to know you, and let's say you have a similar interest. And I said, well, you know Sarah, right? Hector, you know Sarah. Sarah could tell you, we had a great time at this show. We really love this kind of music. You have your reference. So when you're doing in your behavioral interview and behavioral answer, you say, and I've listed Sarah as one of my references. She was my supervisor. She could tell you exactly how this thing all came out. You've done a number of things there in that one answer, and they had got to know you. There are questions, I really believe that the way that people ask questions has a lot to do with how they treat other people.
And when you talk about questions in a date, across that table, it's a dialogue.
Yes.
So questions are going to come from both sides.
Sure.
So taking your example there, after you've given your behavioral answer, what would you think about following that up with saying, and what do you think the strength of this company is?
It's a great point. You do a similar thing. I really am passionate about good customer service. What are some of the biggest issues that you all have here with customer service? Well, the turnover in our customer service department is 102%. Boom, there's a big gong just went off in your brain.
Yeah. But you won't know that unless you ask the question.
Unless you ask the question.
And you don't wait until the end of the interview to do that. As in, you don't wait till the end of the date, and then before you get up from your table, you say, "Oh, by the way, let me ask you a couple of things."
Exactly. And it's that same, it's the way that people have been trained to do their job search. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. You're submissive, they're dominant. The employer is dominant, you're submissive. You wait for them to ask a question, you give an answer. You wait for them to ask a question, you give an answer. It's not the way it works on a date.
That'd be a pretty boring date, wouldn't it?
Well, it wouldn't be a second date. And here's the other thing. And when you start talking about the date, and there's so much to talk about here, but so little time. You go on a date, and you realize during the course of the date, you ain't going out again. All right? So in the middle of the interview, you are going out on the date, and you're going, God, I wouldn't work for this company if I had to. I don't care how much money they'd pay me. I wouldn't work here. So at the end of the interview, they go, we'd really like to talk to you again about an opportunity here. Can we contact you for a date? And you go, sure. It's not going to. You're so happy that they want to talk to you again. That instead, what I've recommended to people, and I've done it myself, I don't really think we've got a match here. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with the employer, and for the employer to be honest with the person. Here's what happens realistically. So you haven't had an interview in months. You get an interview, and your spouse or all your friends are going, call me after the interview, text me after the interview. How did it go? How did it go? Oh, I think it went pretty well. Well, how do you know it went pretty well? You don't know what the next step is. You haven't asked them. You haven't asked them if they find if there's a certain degree of compatibility. Are we going to go out again? It's like, that you're not going to go out with this guy again, and he drives you home, and there's no kiss, obviously, and he drives you home, and he says, I'd really like to call you again. I'd like to go out with you again. What do you say to him? Do you say, well, go ahead and call me? And then you never return his calls, and you never answer him. That's but in real life, if you want to shut it off right then and there, you say, it was a fun evening, but I don't think we'll be going out again. Is that rude? No, it's not rude. And if you're an employee talking to an employer, you need to let them know that you're not interested. That's only fair. Conversely, an employer needs to be honest with a person and not get their hopes up because they go, oh, I think it went real well. And they never hear a darn thing back, which is rude. An employer, a person that has invested the time to come out and talk to the company deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And most employers today don't do it. And it's a simple email, thank you for coming in, and if they don't see that there's a match, and here's the other thing, and I want to digress just a second. Who's doing the interviewing? Who is evaluating you? Who is evaluating your talent? Do you want to go out, if for instance you're in your 40s, you're redating again, you're dating again. Do you want this lady's 14-year-old daughter to evaluate you of whether or not you're compatible with her mother? So what the heck is the difference between many of the HR 24-year-olds right out of college that a corporation hires to be the interviewer who can no more evaluate which cell phone they're going to use to evaluate your talent? So, I'm really obviously animated about this, but I believe in this. Who's evaluating the talent of the organization? Who's making the hiring decision? You've got to look at that as part of your evaluation. So who's going to evaluate you once you're hired? What role does HR play in this whole process? I think screening can be a real key component, but truly evaluating the talent, it takes a skill. It takes a real ability. It takes an art to evaluate talent. And who's evaluating talent in the organization?
But sometimes you have to get past that interview to get to the hiring manager.
You
where
do,
the real
but,
interview is.
but that's true, Hector. But here's the other thing. Is that the place you want to work? You got to ask yourself that kind of question. What is their hiring process? You know, do you have to go through his mother before he'll go out with you? Or do you have to meet his father before you can go out with him? You know, it's a similar type of thing. Are they doing the pre-screening? Or who's actually, if you can get to the hiring manager, that's the person you want to talk to. In large corporations, that's not how it is. But it's not a game. And I won't want people to think of it as a game anymore. I want them to think of it as their own courtship. And even the way the questions are asked, you know, is something that gives you an indication of who they are. I've always, and sometimes, the best policy is to be honest with people and just to say, you know, we're not going out again. And we'll get into this in the next section. And when they say, "Will you marry me?" you know, making that decision as well. But I mean, when you go through the process, you may go on 2 or 3 dates and realize, you know, you're just not compatible.
So what I hear you saying is not only what is said, but how do you feel? If what is said is not bad, but if you still have an uncomfortable feeling, then there is something there that's bothering you, and you need to look at that.
Yes, and would you go on a date and at the end of the date decide that you're going to marry the person? Do you know enough?
That depends how much you've drank.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. But I mean, even in that, you're dealing in a different setting. To go into a restaurant on a date is going to be a different setting than you're sitting on your couch and you just got your electric bill in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how are you going to? Have you ever seen this person in an adverse setting? Have you ever seen this person in a problem-solving setting? Have you ever seen this person when they delivered the wrong food to dinner? How do they treat the server? You know, I won't go into a family situation. Yeah, I will. My sister-in-law is, she's never going to watch this. I can get away with it. And I've signed in a waiver anyway. She's one of the rudest people to servers I've ever seen. Well, there's an indication of, and then I got to know about how she used to do her work in the private sector. That's a great indicator of how, when you're going out with somebody, how they treat other people as well. You listen to your interviewer, the people in the environment. You know, I had a personal situation where I was being interviewed as the number 2 HR person in this major corporation in Chicago. They flew me in, picked me up in a limo. They drove me. I was in a conference room. They shuttled people in. They brought donuts in. They brought lunch in. I met with the CEO. I met with the CFO. I met with all the key people in the corporation. At the end of the day, they took me. I was able to use the restroom. They picked me up in a limo, and I flew back to Kansas City. And my wife says, "Are you interested? It's a really big job, a lot of money. We'd have to move to Chicago." I said, "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because I was in a conference room all day. They kept me from seeing the culture. They purposely did not want me to see the work environment. They were hiding it from me." Think about that. It's those subtle little things that go on in a date that people pick up on.
Sure. Mm-hmm. How does the date treat the waiter?
Exactly. How does a date treat you? Language, how they say certain things, inflections. You know, it's the little things why people are compatible. You know, the old joke about not putting a cap on the toothpaste, or not putting the toilet seat down, or whatever it is. So it's those compatibility issues that you really need to take a look at, because that's where you're going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day. What are their work environment? What does their workspace look like? Do they have a cafeteria? Do they, you know, is it? I did a study for a major corporation in Omaha, and they was having large turnover, and they didn't understand why they had such large turnover in this high technology group of young graduates. It's because if you were, based upon your seniority, you got to park lower on the parking garage than everybody else. And they had to do this and they were treated as second-class citizens until they made it. Well, in today's world, that's not how you want to go on a date. That's not how you want to make a decision who you work with. But you got to pay your dues with somebody before
you're treated well.
Yeah, before you're treated well. So,
well, we will get into what happens after the dating in another podcast. I want to thank you for being here, and definitely you're compatible with us.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
If somebody wanted to reach you, get some more information, or get you to speak at one of their events, where could they reach you?
Best way, my mobile phone, excuse me, 913-302-7892. It's my personal. Or through Habitat at Mark, M-A-R-K, at heartlandhabitat.org. And I have access to it 24/7, and I do respond. Timely.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You can hear more advice and information from Mark and other guests by listening to past chats on our website at www.newlandingsjobchat.org, or just search for Job Chat on YouTube. Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.
And as always, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.